This is 3D in Review, where we talk about the latest in all 3D news, as well as interviews, tutorials, and the latest projects from the tech closet. If this is your first time listening, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or YouTube.
God, your software is a mess. I've rebooted your acceleration module. You should be able to squeeze through that turbine.
Oh, hi there. Hi. I guess I should stop playing that and join the show, huh? Hello there. Hi, this is Mike Balzer, and this is All Things 3D, and maybe I should shut this off. Sorry about that. Hi. Geez, just knocked out my headset. So this is 3D in Review for January 27th, 2023. And what you were seeing there, I'll go ahead and fade back, is I was trying out NVIDIA GeForce Now with the, like on an e-reader. This is a Boox e-reader that I've kind of retrofitted a cover for. I got it a few years back. It runs Android, and as you're probably aware of, NVIDIA has an app. Geez, I'm dropping everything around here. So it's kind of neat to be able to, I guess, play games on your e-reader. Oh well, so enough of me playing games. Let's kind of get right into the news. And the first item we have is kind of cool. So let me go ahead and bring that up real quick. And it appears there are some new techniques in essentially enveloping sensors that are put in the body, basically using hydrogel, which is obviously more conducive to be inserted to the body versus artificial or synthetic materials like silicone. Because once you create a hydrogel around an object, the body doesn't reject it or has any reaction to it. And this was actually done by Dr. Nanzhao of Westlake University, and it looks like a really interesting way of using 3D printing, and we'll probably see more of these type of things in the future. All right, moving on to the next item. I thought this was interesting, and this is more to home here in, or actually south of me in California. This individual, Tyler Ray, assistant professor out at, where is it at Santa Barbara, California, at the Materials Research Laboratory, has developed a way to 3D print materials to create batteries, as you can see there. And so I think that's also a very interesting way. Literally, if you can read the answer, the article here, essentially creating nanoparticle electrodes for high capacity batteries. And if you're familiar with battery technology, the electrodes are very important as far as ensuring the most power is essentially flowing from one electrode to the other, and by able to literally build them up, nanoparticle as I show here, single component or nanoparticle by nanoparticle, you have a much more control over the amount of electrode that's being created. And so I think this is a very interesting method. So kudos to him. On to the next item. As you're probably aware of, OpenAI has kind of taken over in many different areas, but if you're into 3D modeling and creating objects, you're going to see that AI is now going to be taking place there. This individual, Kyle Wiggers, is basically in a small article on creating appears to be fairly primitive 3D objects, but I've seen some more elaborate ones, but essentially taking the cloud point and then remeshing it. And as you can see, we have some tiny little 3D objects here. I've seen a little bit more complicated ones. Somebody was doing it on Twitter, so we'll probably see a lot more of that in 2023. Sadly, those people who generate 3D content probably won't get the sales, but frankly, I will continue to support them. All right, on to the next item. 3D printing large buildings. This is kind of interesting, and we'll kind of go right into the story here.
Your average building. Layers of concrete are laid down by an enormous 3D printer, weighing more than 12 tons. It's creating what's believed to be the first 3D printed two-story home in the United States. Constructing the 4,000 square foot house will take a total of 330 hours of printing. That's according to architect Leslie Locke, co-founder of a design studio called Hanna.
In the designing of this house, we not only think about the general floor plans and usage, but we also design the actual print path, like how the printer will print, where it starts and where it stops.
The project is a 2-year collaboration by Hanna, Perry 3D Construction, and CIVE, a construction engineering company. Locke says since the printer does all the heavy lifting, less workers are needed at the construction site.
It is a much faster construction process, and it also requires only 4 to 5 people crew on site to print a whole house. And so you can see that on site we have currently 5 people. One of the benefits is also it takes a lot of the heavy lifting, the labor out of the human, and where the printer is doing the heavy lifting.
The 3-bedroom house will feature a hybrid design of wood framing and concrete. Concrete can withstand the hurricanes, storms, and other severe weather in Texas. It's becoming more frequent and severe due to climate change. Roberto Montemayor is the project manager at Perry 3D Construction.
So basically this works very similar to the small plastic desktop 3D printers with 2 major differences. The first one is the size, of course. This printer can be expanded and contracted to print whatever project size you need to achieve. And second is the material. We are printing here with concrete, which is a completely different material than plastic.
The house is expected to be completed in the second half of 2023. Builders hope the innovative technique can one day help more quickly and cheaply build multi-family homes.
The design logic and layout and structure system of this building can be readily scalable and applicable for multifamily housing. And we really see that this can be the direction that we can really leverage 3D printing in that respect.
Well, as you can see, it's really interesting where we've come with this. In a few episodes back, we talked about single home dwellings, but now, obviously, the nozzles and the whole structures, it's kind of funny how it's basically just scaled up from what you can do at your home. And instead of extruding plastic, you're using gravity to lay out concrete. I thought it's kind of interesting that they identified why they would go with concrete, but I thought it was funny. You can see the layers being actually placed upon, it appears, timbers in order to reinforce wood versus steel. So I thought that was an interesting way to move forward with this. And having actually lived in Houston and on the Gulf Coast, hurricanes are a problem, and building strong structural homes is probably the direction that you're going to see a lot of people going to, especially if they've lost a home. Okay, on to the next item. So this one's an interesting too. I'll just play a little bit of it, but essentially this guy wanted to 3D fabricate some organs. I don't know if he's actually going into surgery, but he had his organs printed And then using the Da Vinci surgical system, they went through and practiced the procedure. I know, again, you'll have to read the article if it was him, but here's a...
I got an email from a company called Lazarus 3D offering to show me my own internal organs. Not on a screen or visualization, but by 3D printing a full-size, realistic and heavy copy of my abdomen and cutting into it with an actual surgical robot. Now, this isn't going to be the version with full realistic blood. YouTube probably wouldn't like that, but if you're scared of surgery, you might want to watch through your fingers. And also, this isn't an advert. I paid for my own MRI scan to get the data that they've worked with, but I'm not exactly doing a randomized controlled trial here either. The company wants to show off. The case studies I've seen look solid, but I am not qualified to check medical claims. I'm just a guy who's about to watch someone cut into a 3D printed copy of my own guts.
So our early studies indicate that by performing rehearsals, there can be clinical benefits, but that's something that's going to need to be borne out as we perform more and more studies.
Let's open it up.
Let's do it.
In every other human endeavor, the best violin player in the world
Move forward
As
with it.
heavy as I am. There we go.
Take the time to
improve that design and allow for production
watch
to
the entire
begin.
video, but it's interesting.
Yes, sir.
Material.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just how it's
So this is a
flexible,
depiction of the
organs are inside.
We originally made our model
Actually,
They've switched off a few things, right? So I don't have stomach or intestines there, and it's not bleeding.
as it drains out of that system, but then because
behind your vasculature,
Right.
and that's the lung actually doing the real dissection of a
Obviously.
kidney. The difference with the
very
robot,
interesting
unlike with
way of, I guess, either watching your own surgery being performed or having somebody be trained on the surgery beforehand. Not sure if that would actually occur, but I think for training purposes, I have seen this in other videos and talked to some surgeons, and this does seem to be the direction. And as you remember, I had 3D printed my wife's skull. She had a meningioma behind her left eye that was difficult to get at, and we went to a specialist, Dr. Gardner, who was a neurosurgeon who worked with let's see, I think an ophthalmologist, surgical team, and between the two of them, they actually went through the roof of her left eye and actually removed the meningioma from that location. So they didn't have to do a craniotomy on her, which was very important because, you know, there are some side effects from that. And the only side effect that she had was a little bit of headaches. She had some issues with essentially seeing double for a while until the swelling in her eye strengthened again, but she's back to normal and you wouldn't know anything had occurred. So I have a lot of, what do you want to call it? Praise for the technology and the research and the time that goes into this. And I'm glad to see that it's being utilized more and more. And I'm assuming, in fact, if I remember correctly, Dr. Gardner and team are now using this process themselves. So it is kind of penetrated dramatically in the hospital since the time that I had actually 3D printed this, which was in 2014. So good for them. All right, let's move on to the next thing. And speaking of, instead of using synthetic materials, we have this this other article where they're actually 3D printing a molecular or a cellular material to be used in breast implants. Obviously, for those who have mastectomies or just wanted to be augmented, the plus behind this versus other materials. It's more lifelike, and more importantly, the body doesn't reject it or has reactions to it as can happen with silicone. If you remember, there was a big scare, I can't remember, in the 80s and 90s of silicone bursting and creating all kinds of problems. So having something that is, in this case, it's a biomaterial that's a collagen that actually I think it's plant type material. But the important thing is that it seems to be safer, and most important is that the body seems to have no problem. And okay, so let's move on to Nerf 3D. Actually, I downloaded this app and to my phone, and unless you need to run the premium version, I couldn't see directly how this app functions. It says it gives users a freemium pricing structure. I don't really understand what they're saying there. As soon as that I open up the app, I could essentially scan my room. I don't know if there was any detail functionality, but I will play with it more and do more of a review later. I don't know what's available in the Google Play Store. As mentioned, the iOS app can use the LiDAR camera if you've got an iOS 13 Pro, 12, and an iPhone 13 Pro or up or below. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. I thought this is interesting. We'll go ahead and play the video. It's short.
Бачили, прилітають ракети в Київ, в інші міста, в Харків, центр міста. Я бачу, що пам'ятка за пам'яткою втрачається, потім музей Сковороди згорів. Тобто я зрозумів, що це може мати фатальні наслідки. А 3D-сканування дозволяє це робити за лічені, не скажу години, за дні.
Загалом зараз у нас приблизно 40 об'єктів відскановано, але що мається на увазі відскановано, це коли лазерним сканером плюс фотограметричною технологією відскановано зовні і зсередини. Тому що загалом просто дроном політати, відфотографувати – це теж як оцифрування, але це не таке якісне, як ми зараз робимо. Тому ми окремо в цей проект вписуємо ті пам'ятки, які ми дуже якісно відсканували, які в майбутньому можна було відновити у випадку їх руйнації.
Well, I thought that was very interesting. As you know, they combined multiple scanning techniques, photogrammetry, in order to capture the buildings in Ukraine for prosperity and historic reference. And I think that that's very important. I believe this was also done in Syria, and I want to say in Iraq, but I don't recall. There was another Middle Eastern country, city that was utilizing this as well. Sadly, during war, you can't always protect your monuments and your landmarks. And it's interesting that they do mention here the Nazi Air Force, which had destroyed many buildings. But ironically, from obviously, there were probably some damaged buildings, but I do know a lot of because I lived in Germany for 7 years, a lot of the historic buildings, castles, churches still stood. Obviously, in the areas around the Rhine where manufacturing, there may have been significant damage, but from a lot of places in Germany, they still, like Neuschwanstein, still exist and was not damaged. So I think hopefully Ukrainians don't suffer a lot, but in any case, having the ability to do this is really important. So good for them. And if there's some way that one can donate to the project, I guess I'll look into that. All right, I thought this was cool from the VR perspective. Kind of a retro headset based upon a Raspberry Pi, but the reality is it doesn't exist. It is rendered in Blender. It's a 3D model, but from all intents and purposes, it looks pretty realistic to me. It was fabricated in 3D based upon wood materials, a wood band, a little plastic shell in front of the Raspberry Pi itself, and then the housing. But what I thought was interesting, and here you can see the lenses. Somebody else made this comment as well. Not much comfort around the nose and around the edge of the inner cowl that fits on your face, so it probably wouldn't be too comfortable. And then the front here, don't see a lot of ventilation ports, and not that the Raspberry Pi requires it, but it can still get hot. And the other fun thing is, someone mentioned this actually has 2 Raspberry Pi cameras, but the Raspberry Pi itself does not have 2 ports for camera usage. So as you can see there, you can see where one is connected, but the other one is just kind of there. But in saying that, I do think there's somebody who has created a dual camera system that can be hooked up to a Raspberry Pi. I know I have one, a stereo camera system that runs on USB, so it is possible. But I just think the renders of this thing are just stupendous, and it'll be interesting if somebody actually goes back and recreates it. So this was done by Moonshake 3D. Okay, on to VR. One of the things that if you've got an Oculus Quest 2, you may have tried running it without wires through Wi-Fi, and unless you've got like a Wi-Fi 6 or 6E, you might find the performance not too significantly of an improvement over, in fact, it may be degraded significantly, maybe choppy. In my case, I used a Wi-Fi access router with a Ethernet cable directly to it, and my performance was reasonable. It did seem to be a little bit bandy, if you know what I'm speaking of. Seemed to be some artifacts from the compression, but it was, in my case, very insignificant. But my eyes aren't the best, so those of you who have eagle eyes probably would want a little bit more quality. What is being said in this particular article from Mixed is that using this small M2 Intel AX1690 chip that has been improved to work with the MetaQuest Pro, you can use the wireless functionality, and because this particular chip, it also goes under the name, oh no, I can't remember, Killer Wi-Fi, and here's a little video that shows. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. So you can watch the video completely. As you know, I have all the links to these news items in the show notes. But the point I want to make on this is that it claims 5 millisecond latency. This person went ahead and received information from the person who creates Virtual Desktop and said, no, I'm pretty sure that if you've got a network connection directly into your access router, and then the access router is providing Wi-Fi 6 to the Quest, and I think if the Quest has 6E, so if you have a 6E router, it even performs better. You don't have that kind of latency. I could see this being a problem if you only had a laptop, but even if you had a laptop, you could still connect to the Ethernet for your Wi-Fi functionality, but and then have wireless being utilized with your Quest Pro with a standard Wi-Fi chip that's into it. So spending the extra money, and they are more expensive. I just purchased one on eBay for $43. Found out that it's kind of useless to me because I don't have a Intel Generation 12. Well, actually I do, but I didn't want to put it on that. I actually have 11th generation and a 10th generation, which is, I guess, an LGA 1200 chipset, and it will not function on it. It essentially wouldn't work. And then I found out it's because you have to have a 12th generation Intel chip or a 13th generation. So I do plan to get another motherboard and 12th generation for another project that I'll be bringing up later, and we'll try it there. But again, if you already have an access point, just connect your Ethernet directly in that with your Wi-Fi or your desktop, and then connect to that. That's what I do. You can get those things relatively inexpensive, like $50, $75 for a small one, and it works really well. I've been using it, almost a year and a half now, and it's worked really well. So, I mean, it's up to you. I can see this being advantageous if you just want one unit, one to connect to the internet via Wi-Fi, and essentially allow your Quest to be able to download, or just switch it off, get all your applications in there that way. Not really sure the importance of that, but anything that can improve latency with an all-in-one unit I can see being beneficial, but it just seems like it's a little bit more expensive than other things that are on the market. Okay, let's move on to something that I actually have. Let's see where it's at. Here it is. This is from a company called Leia Incorporated. They create the LoomPad, but they've kind of discontinued that, and it looks like they're going to be looking at, let's see what they got for products. A tablet that, there's their 10.8, but it's out of stock. I don't know if they're going to be bringing it back. Sadly, it's still on, I think, Android 10, so it's not even on 11 or 12. I've been asking about it, but never getting a reply. And then they're going to have a 12.4, and then essentially 2 monitor systems. The monitors, as well as the tablet, have, they call it 8 views landscape, or 12 views and 8 views, but essentially it provides a wider FOV. Here you can see this tablet is 86 degrees, 86, 86, and the purpose of that, or how it's being done, is it's actually doing stereo head tracking, so it knows where your head is in front of the monitor, and it will displace the actual parallax of your 3D based upon your head location. So it gives you a much better field of view so that you can move around, and as you can see, 33 degrees in the previous version. It gives you, essentially you have to have it right up in front of your face and not really move around a lot to get the best stereo effect. But in saying that, it is pretty cool. Let's see if I can turn this on and show you. Let's see if we can bring something up, and then we'll do the Leia frame. We'll bring up some of the cuties. Okay, here we go. So I don't know how apparent this will be. Oops. Damn. Problem with touchpads. There you go. Here you can see it. You can see as I rotate it, some work better than others. So they obviously look better if you have both your eyes looking at them. But I've taken images from the actual, here's a nice one from Perseverance with its dual camera system. Let's see if I can bring that one up. Yeah, I may have to do it through the Leia player. Here's a good one. That's the boar. So a lot of these are on their website. So if you do have a loom pad, you can just look up Owl. I think it's under Owl Creek Technologies, and be able to view them. It's pretty good. This was actually a great deal when they were available. I think I got mine for like $279, $300. Very reasonable. They originally came out like $700, $800, which was a little pricey, but as you can see here, they're coming out with a few more items, but when I actually talked to one of the salespeople, I was told that they were going to be pretty pricey, and as you can see here, it's available through partners, so they're not even selling them. It's coming soon. I don't know if they'll actually sell it themselves or it'll be available through partners, but it'll be very interesting to see. I guess they were at CES and they were kind of a hit. So that's about it for the news. One other item, I did an interview with Vikas Reddy that I'm going to have available as well as soon as I get this one up. And I'll put that one up as well. He's been working on something special. You may be familiar with the name. They've been on the show many years ago, but they started a company called Occipital, and creating a 3D scanner. So he's taken that knowledge and created a unique, what they call a virtual studio, which I will be trying out myself in the future. But they have 3D sets that were done in Unreal, and you yourself can be doing that too if you'd like. But pretty cool. The interview was really great. I was able to basically teleport into his virtual studio, so you'll get a chance to take a look at that. He doesn't really have any information yet on pricing. He's going to be opening it up for beta very soon, so I think it's going to be really exciting. Okay, so let's move on to my favorite area, and that's the tech closet. And on that note, so we'll talk a little bit about things that I've been working on, and we'll have more about that in the future. But probably the biggest one, I'm calling it the, let's see if I can drop some things out here. Okay, put that over there, put this over here. I guess we can show this first. So one of the things I was working on, let's see if you can see this. Let's jump to this screen. I don't know if you're familiar with the card, but this is based on an RX 6400. You can see compared to my hands here how tiny it is. It is a PCI 4 Gen 4 adapter, but the interesting thing is it only uses 4 lanes and still provides some decent processing or GPU functionality. It's got 2 ports, HDMI and a dual port right there. I've kind of taken off the bracket here, and if you notice, I've got this on a small case. In reality, this case is a Thunderbolt 3 that has an adapter for a PCIe card. So I have a PCIe M2 card to a PCIe, so I think this is a 4 channel. Place the card in it, used a little zip tie to keep it all in place. It's got an adapter here to run power. I've got a little 12 volt coax, so I'm running this basically off of a 5 amp 12 volt pack. So you could use a battery if you wanted to. And then I hooked it up to like a, when did I buy it? 2017, was an 8th generation NUC, and it actually works pretty good. It's got like a 3400 3D Mark rating on it, and have been able to play some, low-end 1080p games. But if you've ever tried to use integrated graphics on the earlier NUCs, this really kind of bumps it up. Really improvement. The cool thing is the card itself, you can get around $130, $140. This whole thing here cost about $100. So altogether 250, and you've got yourself a Thunderbolt graphics. Now, obviously, if you wanted something beefier, you would have to scale everything up, but you can get something that can house a larger card, and then you get a cheap card. But the key thing here is the PCI adapter, and that can also be utilized with some of these other things you can get on eBay. And again, this was only the whole, including the card, about $230, $240, and you can scale that up. If you've got an old car that you want to try, you can probably get the housing for about $150 that hooks up to PCI, just like this. So there are some things out there cheaper than some of these things that you're seeing from, I can't think of the name, that makes laptops. Has the green logo. It'll come to me by the end of the show, but they're normally fairly pricey, and they're bulky, and obviously it doesn't look very fancy. But if you built a case around it, you could come up with something a little more elegant. I kind of like this low grade, what do you want to call it, low tech, high tech look to it. Okay, let's move on to another item that I've been working on. I call it the gaming lens. Let's see if I can drag this over without disconnecting power to it. So this is mounted on a little bracket. It's all magnetic based, and essentially, I don't know if you can see the unit here, I'll show it to you. It's a UM690, and so I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And a 720p, or actually it's 800p screen, IPS. Let's see, let's hide that so we don't get to, oh, you can still see me. I guess I can just switch cameras. There we go. All right, there we go. So it's a decent screen. And I've been able to, let's play Stray real quick. It actually provides, I think, 5 or 10 point touch on this particular panel. The cool thing is I have some fairly large little speakers behind here. But it is housed and mounted. I'm going to have a new bracket soon that I'm creating that brings the panel more over the, but there you can hear the audio from. Okay, so as you can see, it's functioning now. And the cool thing is, it will have a, this is obviously pretty thick, but I'm having a company create a cable that allows, it's going to be about 4 millimeters thick, and will house the HDMI and a USB. There'll be a USB hub up here that will have 3 ports, and as you can see here, it's open in the back. So essentially, these are the 2 speakers. I'm going to be using a different driver that actually will drive the whole membrane back here. It'll also be a little less in weight. One of the things I'm looking for is this whole thing being less than or about 500 grams, so that it doesn't feel as bulky. This one here is only on a single pivot mount. The one that I actually am working on is a dual pivot that has a tightening, so it'll be more rigid. And the panel that I'm looking at, this is an 8-inch. I'll make a 7-inch version that will keep it I think it's only like 190 grams. So the whole thing is going to be extremely lightweight. As mentioned, I did take the battery out of this, but it's not that significant, so I'm not sure if I'll leave it in. And then the whole thing will be able to be removed, so it gives you your control box. Or you can leave it as is, just mount it back on the pivot point and untighten it a little bit. And then you can use this kind of like an arcade type system. So if you ever play Stray, fun game. It's been great to use this to demo with. Yeah, it's clearly been turned off. The nice thing about the PS4 or the DualShock or the DualSense PS5 is that they have gyros in them, so you can actually move them around like this. If you have a driving vehicle game, you can literally use it like a driving wheel and the screen will move with you, so it's kind of cool. And again, if you want to sit back and relax at your desk, you just do like I'm doing right now and just kind of hold it over here. So it's kind of a neat feature. Again, this version will be a little bit more expensive, but the whole goal is to create this for about $100 and make it available, I don't know, probably in about 3 months, and use it with a little mini PC or your laptop as essentially another screen, and you can use the base that I have here or mount it like I've got here. So I don't know, I think it's kind of neat. I have fun with it, and with all the rage of having a Steam Deck, you know, I can't afford a Steam Deck and then all these little mini PCs. And the other cool thing that I'll show here in a minute is, I guess I can get out of this. If you notice, I've got this kind of tape over it. It's an industrial, it's actually for vehicles to kind of protect the edge while I'm designing the case for it. So that's why it looks kind of kludgy. But one thing that I noticed is that if you put anything down on the bottom lip here, one of the neat features of these touch screens, which they do work, if not a little bit more difficult because they're smaller. But as you can see here, I think the screen looks really nice. I have a few of these that have a no glare sheet over them, so they look really good. And for an IPS screen, basically 1280 by, I want to say 800, it's really nice. And you know, to me, it looks just as good as what you get on a Steam Deck. Actually, it's a little larger. So again, this will probably be, the 8-inch will be 120, 7-inch will be and it will actually, both of them will be QLED when they're finally out. And I'm looking at 3 to 4 months down the road. So hopefully you'll stay with me on that, and I'll talk more about how to make one yourself if you just want to try it. As you can see, it's not that difficult. So the other one that I'm working on, let's kind of move this back out of the way. Oh, and the other cool thing is that I've been using, let's see if you can see it here, these 19-volt battery packs that are for drills and other more high amperage stuff. They work great with this. I get about 2 hours with the mini PC. I used them previously for some VR projects, and I'm kind of going back to that, and I'll talk about more about that at a later date, using both the RX 2400 as well as I just was able to find these refurbished versions on I guess eBay, but I think Amazon also carries them, of the NVIDIA RTX A2000, which, if you're familiar with it, is an more of an enterprise video card, but it's essentially the same thing as if I remember correctly, a 3050, between a 3050, 3060. So if you can pick one up, they got 6 gigabytes, about $250. The real cool thing is other than they have a thicker shell, they're almost the same size as this card here, but it is a full 16-bit channel, also PCI 4 Gen 4, which I'm not using in now, but it seems to run really well as a Gen 3 card, and basically getting medium settings for Half-Life 2 Alyx, and so it actually runs really good. I kind of like it. All right, so this last time I'm going to show is, if you're familiar with this really cool chip, if you've been working with Raspberry Pis, you've probably found out that by now that Raspberry Pis are very difficult to get, especially the Raspberry 4. This is the Orange Pi 5, which is based upon the Rockchip RK. Oh, don't want that falling down. Let's see. Now I've already forgotten the number. Geez, that's not good. I think I want to say 3358. But it's capable of 4K, 8K video. 8K, I think, at 30 frames per second. So as a media player, it really performs well. It's got all kinds of connectors on it here. I've got this connected to an HDMI. And what else do I have hooked up? Audio. And then I found these cute little, they're Bluetooth boxes, but they have an audio in. So again, I mounted to create a little mounted system with a little panel on it, so that you can play games. And one of the things that I've been experimenting with, that's what I showed earlier on the show, was using this with as kind of like a cloud-based gaming system. But there's a chip from another company that called, let's see if I remember their name. It's called the Rock Pi 5B. Here you can see that it's come on. That can run this version of Linux for ARM that is pretty well made. And most importantly, and what I found with this, even though it's a cheap board, it's about $84. Getting it to work with Wi-Fi, you have to use a USB with their Android version, because it only has one M2 slot, where some of the more expensive ones have two MT slots. One for the SSD, which is what's running the OS here, and the other one is running Wi-Fi. This again has a little touch screen. Oh, this one actually works, yay. And as mentioned, I've got yeah, there is the NVIDIA GeForce Now up and running. So and then we'll go ahead and turn this little guy on. Where's my little switch? It says I have to connect the Wi-Fi. I think I may have turned it off. So let's turn it on. There we go. Sadly, it only supports a particular 150 megahertz Wi-Fi card or USB card, so it's not very fast. So it may or may not run very well, but we'll see. Yeah. Also, this card, okay, should have a gamepad up and running. And notice I'm using an Xbox controller with this. But the board's only $84. Obviously, it's running off of Android 12, but it is not Play Store certified. So you're going to have, it says that it's not going to run very well. But it also has a network port, and I just so happen let's see, we can kind of move this. By the way, I'm powering this with this little 5-volt battery pack here. So let's plug this in and see if that'll improve things. Appears to be doing it. Don't hear any audio though. I guess it helps to have this plugged in if I want to use. There we go. So now I've got so this one has audio, so we should be able to get some audio out of this. But the reason I put this on here is that I'm going to use a lighter LCD panel that will be able to work with it. So let's figure out why. Maybe it's...
You're alive. Can you hear me? They are already looking for you.
Ooh, that's a little gruesome.
Relax. Your implants are still adjusting to the software. I'm in a prison. I can calibrate only your basic protocols from in here. It'll have to suffice for now. The uprising is finished. Keymaster has won.
A trespasser spotted at Metro Station.
This is bad. You'll have to fight your way out of here. The air ducts lead to another sector.
Oh well, I guess that's about it for the show. And I guess we'll see you next week. Bye. Okay.